So welcome to this edition of Spotlight on Collection. My name is Lori Pickel-Stengel. I'm the Executive Director for the McLeod County Historical Museum. And this year at the Historical Society, we are focused on the anniversary of World War I. And as many of you know, it's 100 years since World War I, and there are many things that are included within that theme, and one of them is Red Cross. And the museum has several artifacts that deal with Red Cross and how they worked with the war effort, not only overseas in Europe, but also right here in McLeod County. Now I'm standing in front of a picture of the restroom from the old fairgrounds, and we don't know a whole lot about this photo, but we do know that it has a lot of Red Cross posters and the big Red Cross symbol on it, and was probably those posters and things were used to help recruit members for the Red Cross and also to promote donations to the Red Cross. We don't have a lot of information on this photograph, so we're asking all of you out there, if you know something more, please stop by the museum or go to our website, www.mcleodhistory.org, send us an email and let us know so we can add it to our records. But this is what we have in our records. It says, a framed black and white photograph of the ladies' restroom. The building was located along the track at the old McLeod County Fairgrounds, Hutchinson, Minnesota. Several health and Red Cross posters are on the building. And this would have been a way for them, obviously, to get information out and recruit. But we don't know if this was during World War I time period. More than likely not. But the Red Cross has actually a very long history, and it did not start in World War I, although World War I, it grew exponentially. So, on October 29th, 1863, delegates meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, adopted 10 resolutions aimed at helping wounded soldiers, thereby launching what would become the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. So back in 1863 was actually when it was officially started, and not in America, in Switzerland. And really, it grew out of a very tragic event. And one of the things when I was doing my research that I found, there's a great website, and I'm going to highlight a few things from that on the History Channel on the 7 things you might not have known about the Red Cross. I'm going to highlight some of those just to give you a little bit of background. But in 1859, a Swiss entrepreneur named Jean-Henri Dunant went to search for, of all people, Napoleon Bonaparte. So it was during the Napoleon Wars in 1859. He was in Italy, and he witnessed a horrific battle. Over 40,000 men were wounded and killed or dying on the battlefield right in front of his very eyes, and there was no organized help for them. At this time, when you fought in a war, there was no thinking or planning about how that affected the communities that they were in and the people there, or the soldiers themselves after battle. And so it was pretty much an unorganized mess. He and a lot of the citizens in the town in Italy where they were at, they did the best they could. They tried to get water to the soldiers. They tried to set up medical facilities, but really there was nothing, no resources for them. And so Dunant really from this time forward had it in his mind that something must be done to form some kind of humanitarian organization that was above the battle, so it wasn't for one side or the other, but was just there for the people who were affected, the soldiers and the civilians. Now today, you know, we think of the Red Cross in the times of horrific fires, floods, and they of course have grown to include all of those things. But at this time, it was really out of a need for war and the aftermath of war. But not everyone believed in the Red Cross. And Dunant actually, in his promotion of this, wonderful humanitarian idea, he used the image of Florence Nightingale. And we all have that image of Florence Nightingale at the side of the soldier on the battlefield, and she's sacrificed everything for to help these soldiers, and literally falling in love with a soldier and aiding them. So, but Miss Nightingale did not like that. She actually was at first against the Red Cross. She felt that each country should be responsible to take care of these things like food and help and for the soldiers, because they were the ones involved in the battle. They should take care of their own. Whether they did it or not was another thing, but she felt that this would give, if we had an international Red Cross or Red Crescent group that would sweep in every time there was a war somewhere, that would totally encourage more battles, more war, because the individual countries that were starting these wars possibly wouldn't have to worry about cleaning up the mess afterwards. So she was against it. Now, she eventually came around and she ended up joining a Red Cross group herself once it took off and became very popular. But at first, there was a lot of people who didn't like it, didn't like the idea. So this is internationally. How did it come home here in America? Well, a woman named Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross in the U.S., and she was a one-time clerk in the U.S. Patent Office. She spent, though, a huge amount of time on the battlefield during the American Civil War. And she started back in 1881 trying to promote, because of, again, what she saw on the battlefield and the need there, some kind of a humanitarian effort. Well, she found out the work of Dunant and really liked the idea of the Red Cross. And so by 1900, it officially became a charter member. And really, ever since that time, the U.S. military and the Red Cross have worked hand in hand together. So, when did the Red Cross get really big? World War I. Which brings us into our theme for this year. Before that time, and actually Clara didn't see World War I. She died in 1912. And at that time when she passed away, the Red Cross across the nation only had a few thousand members. So it's still a really, really small, probably not recognizable to most people. So, and this is really where the misconception that the Red Cross started during World War I is because that is when it grew to over 20 million members across the nation. And that didn't even count the junior groups, which were younger women usually and younger kids. And that was 11 million. So it became a powerhouse and was totally behind the war effort in World War I. It still had some opposition at that time, but for the most part, it was a very needed, and it was a something that, because of the need being so big overseas, it didn't really take off hugely until about 1916. Of course, as you know, we didn't enter the war until 1917, but the war had already been raging over in Europe since 1914. So it was about in 1916 that the Allies, who we were supporting overseas, really were in desperate need of supplies and help. And so not only did we send women over there, and men who joined the Red Cross before the war, because the war, they hadn't been drafted yet. So we had men and women from the U.S. represented by the Red Cross, Salvation Army, and other groups to just help the war effort. And they did stuff like canteens to help feed the soldiers, of course, medical, and helped with, there was just after battles, an overwhelming number of soldiers that were brought in that were hurt, not enough nurses to go around, so the Red Cross would come in, help with doing dressings and bandaging and getting water and helping the sick and the dying. So back home, though, by the time 1917 rolled around and the U.S. officially entered into the war effort, that's when a lot of the local groups actually started. And one of the things that we have at the museum that is really cool is they had the forethought to document their own history. This particular booklet was done in 1919. And it's a local McLeod County history of the American Red Cross. And so these different units would be formed. I'll show you. And they would document their own history, and they would have pictures. And not only pictures of who were members in their lovely Red Cross uniforms, just like this one we have, but it also told exactly what they were doing. How many things they were producing at home. Although they couldn't be overseas, they prepared things that could go overseas. And the chapters that we had here in McLeod County were in Glencoe, Hutchinson, Silver Lake, Brownton, Stewart, Lester Prairie, Winsted, Plato. And each of these groups, not only did they have their own units of women, but then they had subunits. So they had a junior Red Cross unit. So it was younger kids that were doing things. They had specific people who did specific things. There was a Silver Lake group called the Silver Lake Knitters. And we have a picture we can show you here of the Silver Lake Knitters. And they're actually, you show them knitting away, making things to send overseas to the soldiers. And in the museum's collection, we actually have an example of a vest that was made. So they not only made vests, but they made full-length sleeved sweaters. They made socks. They knitted caps and hats and all kinds of things that they would have needed on the front for the soldiers. And this particular one is an olive drab sweater vest with a neck tag that says, "From American Red Cross, Memphis, Tennessee chapter, hand knit, sleeveless V-neck design." And that was the thing about the Red Cross. So our McLeod County units didn't necessarily send just to McLeod County soldiers. This came home with a McLeod County soldier, but it was sent from Memphis. So, you know, they received from all over the country these different packages filled with things that the soldiers needed. And that was a huge, huge effort. There were some communities, they were very proud of what they produced. They would say, 10,000 socks sent and, 20,000 bandage rolls sent. And so it was almost became like a little bit of a competition, who was doing more for the war effort. And of course, this took money. When they established these, they had to promote fundraising to keep it going. And let's see here. One of the things that they did was posters. So World War I was the first time really in history, at least in the US, that we got big into propaganda. And we did propaganda posters. I know you say propaganda, people think negative, but it was positive propaganda. And so I'll show you here a poster. This one is a World War I Red Cross poster, and it has a lovely lady dressed in her World War I uniform with a cape, and marching American soldiers are in the background, and it says on it, "Have you answered the Red Cross Christmas roll call?" So, can't get much better than that for propaganda at the heartstrings. Actually, you can, and this next one does. So this next one is a World War I Red Cross poster. It's, again, a lovely Red Cross woman, and she is a giant, apparently, because she's holding this tiny soldier on a gurney like a baby. And the caption reads, "The greatest mother in the world." Now, if you don't open up your pocketbook for that, you have no heart. But they needed to get that information out there, because if you think about 20 million Red Cross workers volunteering. They need, and they're making these things, they need yarn, they need supplies. You know, these uniforms don't buy themselves. And so they did have a huge campaign throughout the war to make sure you're not only doing the things for the war effort, cutting back on your sugar and having meatless Mondays and things like that, but you're also donating to the Red Cross who's doing things and producing things to send overseas. And some of them actually were overseas. I don't have any record in McLeod County of any women that went over, but many did, and some even way before the U.S. even entered the war. So now we have, let's see here, couple of different artifacts that represent other things that the Red Cross did for the war effort. One of the other things that they did is they put together little packages, and they even made these little bags to put them in. Some of them were kits that they sent over to or gave out at the train station as soldiers were leaving, so they'd have all the little things that they might need, a comb, a deck of cards, kind of toiletry items, toothbrush, that sort of thing, soap. So this, according to our records, is an olive drab cotton American Red Cross drawstring bag that contained a smaller olive drab pocket with ties, and it was actually used by Otto E. Petrich in World War I, and he was born September 7th, 1891, and he grew up south of Biscay and served in World War I in France in the military police. And he brought this back home with him. Now, they also made other kits. We can show you another one here. It's called a convalescent bag. And that convalescent bag was used and given out to soldiers who were recouping from the war. And not 100% sure what would have been in those bags, probably bandages and things that, you know, for rest. Maybe it would have a notebook or sheets of paper and a pencil so they could write home to their loved ones while they convalesced and got better. And there's a word you don't use these days. Maybe we should bring it back. I'm gonna go home and convalesce after the flu, right? So there's your word for the day. But these bags were just one more way that they could help the suffering and alleviate some of the soldiers' anguish about being A, so far away from family, and then, you know, B, recovering from their injuries. But one of the other things they did, which was a big part, was writing letters and devising communications with the families at home. And one of the things they came up with that I can show you, this is in our collection. This is a little Red Cross postcard. And it's faded quite a bit on the back. It's a little hard to read, but luckily I have my cheat sheet here. And it's a World War I postcard sent to Mrs. Elizabeth Byteen, Eugene, Oregon, from son Harold J. Byteen, or J. Harold Byteen, excuse me. He was in the 361st Ambulance Company, and he went overseas. And this was something that they automatically, when a soldier left on the boat to go over to France, it says, "This ship on which I sailed has arrived safely overseas on an American Red Cross postcard." And there's no date on it, and there's no postage necessary. But then he also wrote on it, and this was something they offered. Once they made it, it was already ready, it said this, and they could send it right away if they didn't have time maybe to write. And of course, what would be your biggest concern at that time period when your loved ones, well, when did they leave to go overseas? You may not know. It's not like we could pick up the telephone or text like we do today. So you'd want to know, did they make it safely over the ocean? You know, first and foremost. And so this was a quick, easy way that the Red Cross organized to do that. On to the little uniform. So this is a typical uniform that the Red Cross gals would have worn to do their work, and then also for parades, for social gatherings. This in and of itself was a promotional piece. I work for the Red Cross. It's white, I'm neutral. It also says that, just like the flag. This particular one is a coat dress with a small, just a little bitty red cross in the center flap. And it has a little belt, and it's very much styled in the period of the 19 teens. It's a handmade piece. So this piece was made by hand and probably made by a Red Cross unit in Mass. And we believe it belonged to a gal named Ida Grace Dahl Bronham, 1897 to 1991, of Glencoe. She was the wife of Charles Earl Bronham Sr. And a part of these outfits, which was an important part, was the headscarf. And it's just a square piece of linen with a little red cross up at the top. Simple, modest piece. Now, the symbol itself, the Red Cross, where did that come from? Well, this is not the only symbol that can be used to represent the Red Cross. And I can show you a picture up here of some flags that are also the Red Cross is with the crescent, the Red Crescent. And that came out of the Ottoman wars. So during that time period, they wanted to be involved and have the Red Cross, which the Red Cross spread to over 187 different countries now today. But some of them are not Christian countries. Some of them did not feel that a cross really represented them, although they loved the idea of the humanitarian effort that group represented. So even today in a lot of Islamic countries, the crescent is their symbol for the Red Cross. So it's just the red crescent on a white banner. And that started back during the Ottoman wars. But there are others. There are some that have a crystal, I think they call it, and it's kind of reminiscent of the Star of David for some of the predominantly Jewish countries, and several more in and after that. The one common theme is an image that is red on a white banner background. So the Red Cross was a huge part of World War I, and that's really where, in America at least, and in McLeod County, it spread and became huge. So we have a lot more images of things that the Red Cross did, and a lot more items that the Red Cross made and used. And we'd love to have you come down. We have a nice display that's going to be set up for the rest of this year. So visit us. We're out on School Road and Highway 7, across from Burger King. Can't miss us. Big white building. Check it out. Otherwise, a lot of these artifacts are now searchable on our website. So if you can't make it to the museum, the next best thing is go to www.mcleodhistory.org and search World War I or Red Cross, and check out all of the cool items that we have there. Who knows, you might even find a long-lost relative that served in World War I. So I want to also thank McCormick's. They actually sponsored this edition of Spotlight on the Collection, and they are a business membership for just $300. You can be a business membership member too, and you can sponsor the next Spotlight on the Collection. So just let me know, and I'll give you all the information you need.